Hello and welcome to Enough Room, a music learning program of Symphony Nova Scotia. I'm joined this evening by JahMila. Hello, JahMila.
Hey Danielle, how are you doing?
I'm
Thanks for
doing
having me.
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So let's dive right in. You are a reggae artist. You are living in Nova Scotia now for how many years?
About 4 years, actually 4.5 years.
And before that, you were in
Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Oh,
That's right.
Jamaica, man.
Jamaica. All right.
Dongayad.
So that's great. I am half Jamaican, half Trinidadian from the Isles of Trinidad and Tobago.
That's
Um,
awesome.
that's right. So for you, it's rice and peas. For me, it's peas and rice.
It
Uh,
is.
but I do have some. So okay. So let's get right down to the nitty gritty right off the bat. Do you have some favorite places for Jamaican food in Halifax? Where do you go?
Yes, I actually do. I love Brata in Pizza Corner. Oh, wow. They have such
Wow.
good food. And that's only second to my mom's house because she lives
Oh
up in Clayton
yes.
Park, right? So,
Okay.
yep.
So you can
She's
in
not quite as good as my grandmother, but she's exceptional.
so in the chat you can send me the address when I'm back when this all lifts. Then I will be over to Clayton Park having some Jamaican food. That's so great.
Yes, please.
So it's wonderful that you've been here for the past 4 years. I know we work together at Symphony Nova Scotia, and we'll get into that a little bit later. What I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about, for those of us that are part of the Symphony Nova Scotia family, is your Jamaican background. Just tell us about life. What was life like for you in Jamaica?
Sure. So I grew up in the countryside, up in the mountains of St. Anne, high above Ocho Rios, with my grandmother. She's a kindergarten school teacher. And so my yard is always full of kids, always full of playing, and there are all these fruit trees. But anyway, I moved to Kingston, which is the big, metropolitan area of Kingston for school. And that's when I really got to bond with my father because when I was much younger, he was a traveling musician and I
Mm,
didn't get to spend as much time with him as I would have wanted to.
right.
So once I was living in Kingston, I took the opportunity to immerse myself into music and to make up for all those years where I was cultivating my craft in church, as most
Right.
of us do.
Yes. It's true. It's
Yes.
true, isn't it? It's true. So let's talk about that for a moment. What craft did you cultivate in church specifically?
Vocals, yes, because I didn't quite learn how to play a musical instrument. But since I was a child, I've always just been passionate about vocalizing. I'm passionate about not only reggae music, but gospel music, R&B, jazz. It wasn't until I moved to Kingston and got really close with my dad's musical life, that I really understood the legacy that I brought, or that he brought to my life with reggae music. And I
Mm,
immersed myself into it once I was of age and understood what it was. But as a teenager, I was listening to Beyonce.
yeah. And still are, I hope. And
Oh,
still are, I hope.
definitely.
Okay,
Yes.
good. That's good. It's interesting. I believe, I know Whitney had a relationship with the church as well too. I'm sure I should know if Beyonce did or not. I imagine she did. It's funny how many of us started practicing the craft before we knew we were practicing the craft. Because for me, singing, I'm not a singer, obviously, except for in rehearsal. Sorry, orchestral musicians. But a lot of it actually was for me in church was the public speaking, was talking, was welcoming people to a space, guiding them through an experience, and
Yes.
funnily enough, acting. Because I didn't grow up in Baptist church. I grew up in what I like to call PowerPoint church, right? Where it's
Mm.
like the words are up on PowerPoint for the song, and this like it's like
Yes.
you know
Yes.
what I mean. And
I
there
do.
there would often be before the sermon there was a sermon illustration, and that was often the form of a skit. Right, so there was
Yes.
acting in the church. Okay, we're going to rehearse. So it's funny how that becomes part of my career now. But same thing, it was all in the church. So you took that and you integrated that and you fell in love with it in Kingston.
Oh, absolutely. Because at first, I'll tell you all about it. You know too, Daniel, that when you were going to church and getting involved in these activities, you were doing it because it was a passion of yours. When I
Absolutely.
was in Kingston and realized what my legacy was and understood what music could do for me and met all
Mm.
these people, it opened up a lot of doors. And I was like, I can actually earn from this. I remember the first time I got paid to do some background vocals. I was
Mhm.
maybe around 14 years old, and I maybe got the equivalent of 100 US at the time. And I couldn't believe it. I was floored. I was like, they're gonna pay me to do this. But it also shows the sincerity that you approach your craft with, and
Yes.
and your passion with as well. And and as you hone your skills more, you understand that yes, people should honor you in that way because that is a part of you that you're sharing. You know what I mean? You start to sit into
we
it.
go from we go from I can't believe I'm getting paid for this to I better get paid for this. You better pay me for this. But it's funny because it comes full circle. Because I remember, the first time getting paid for conducting, going like, oh, I feel like I'm getting away with something, right?
Yes,
And now it's my
exactly.
job, right? But
Hmm.
I still do feel that way. It's like,
Yeah.
wow. And it's also what's getting paid because yeah, it's a lot of work and it's very intense, blah 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 blah. But just
Yeah.
like I get to do this. We get to do this art.
And we love it. We
We
absolutely
love it.
love it. And
We
if
love it.
that money went away tomorrow, we would still be, I would still be singing
I would
and
still be
you'd be,
conducting. I'd still be
exactly.
conducting.
That's
You
what I'm
know.
saying. And it really, really shows the sincerity that an artist has to his craft, not just me and you, but artists all over the world.
So can you tell us a story of a time when you really maybe one of the first times that you felt really connected to reggae, or one of the first moments where you woke up to you just had an experience that you could never come back from with
Oh,
music. Can you tell us about
absolutely.
a time when that happened?
Definitely. I'm gonna cheat and tell you two times, if that's okay with you.
It's all you have the microphone.
Okay, so one of the times would have been my very first tour. So I was singing in Jamaica, doing small club gigs and such, and doing a lot of background vocalists. That's a lot of recording and support vocals. But when the Wailers, headed by Aston family man Barrett, called for me when I was 21 years old and brought me all through a tour, all through the US, as the youngest person and one of the only two females there,
Mm.
having the opportunity to play with these towering legends. I remember the first night I was on stage and I could not believe it. I was shivering in my boots, but I was also like, my mind was blown.
Mhm.
you know so that was one of the days, and and it was in that moment that I realized that I had an important part to play. And I'm still playing it. I still don't feel like I have given back to music or used the music as a tool to do all the good that I can use it to do. But whenever I reflect on these moments, I feel reinvigorated and I stay the course.
Right.
Another one is when I went back to Africa. Now, I went to Africa as a supporting vocalist for an artist called Richie Spice. It happened almost overnight. They called me the week before and said, are you available to go to Africa? Now, the reason why this was so important for me and touched me so deeply is because I would have been the first person on my maternal side, where I grew up with my grandmother in the countryside, third generation from being a slave, to
Hmm.
go back to Africa, not only as a free woman, practicing my craft, but being paid by the government of Kenya to be there. And I felt like that was a turning point for me and my family as well. I felt like
Wow.
the ancestors would have been happy to know that I had that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was strong. Thank you
That's
for letting me
so,
share.
it's really, really powerful because that's not only about you as an artist giving to people where you are, but really going home, capital H home, in a sense.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, and
Yeah.
that notion, what you just brought up there, how many generations freed, did you say?
Three
Three,
generations.
three generations. So
That's
do you,
correct.
wow. So do you know specific history, or that's what you've counted back? Like, do you know specific people, names, and places in terms of slave history in your family?
Absolutely, I do.
Wow.
So, my great grandmother's name I have two of them because my grandmother was adopted, but my biological great grandmother's name is Sarah, and she was the first person to be born free in my lineage. Now, I don't
Oh,
know what her slave mother's name would have been, but I know that she was the very first woman, and she was also a community leader as well. So she was a
right,
really powerful woman. And my grandmother, as I told you, was a kindergarten school teacher. So,
right. And
yeah.
what was it like for you when you first learned that? When it went from just being, we were slaves to my great grandmother was the
Was a
first,
slave.
yeah, that's right, was a slave.
Yeah.
What's that like? That moment?
You can it brings it into perspective because we are here and we are abusing our freedoms. We don't understand that we are such a lucky generation of people, regardless of what color we have, but all of these potentials and opportunities that are there for us. And it put
Hmm.
things into perspective because that's not so long ago,
It's
Daniel.
not. It's not
No.
that long ago.
No,
It's
and
not
how
that long
quickly
ago.
we've forgotten. How quickly we've forgotten.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are abusing the freedoms that our ancestors fought and died to allow us to
Hmm.
have, you know.
How do you
So
see? How do you see that happening?
I see that happening when young people don't try their best. When
Hmm.
they're not well adjusted, they don't have their head screwed on, you know. There were persons fighting for them to be able to get the right to go to school, yet you go to school and you waste your time. Or even something as simple as reading. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
They used to have to hide to read and hide to have certain books.
Yeah.
And you have all this at your fingertips, and you do not, not you specifically, Danielle.
I was like, oh, she saw me this afternoon on the couch watching Netflix when I should have been working. I'm like, oh,
But
it's
generally,
feeling
it's just some
very.
simple things and how generally
Yes,
we take them for granted.
we do take things for granted, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things. My last name's Bartholomew-Poyser. Sorry, my last name is Bartholomew-Poyser.
Hmm.
It's slave name.
Yep.
Slave name.
Yeah.
Slave
Yes.
name. What's totally disconnected from anything past great grandfathers. Um, Total disconnection from.
Yes.
I mean, and okay, there's like connect. I mean, you know, we have African art and family would have inculcated a sense of belonging, but Africa itself, I haven't been to Africa yet. We'll go,
Yeah.
right? But it's just different when you can say, I know that this person was the first freed person in my family. What a difference it
Absolutely.
makes. And I remember learning that
Absolutely.
some of my family grew up in the same region of Jamaica that slaves were brought from to Halifax. So it's possible that some of my ancestors actually worked on Citadel Hill, right? It's the same.
Okay.
So it's, oh wow. When I read that when I was doing research, um, oh oh
Yes. Yes.
wow,
So
it's
you're a maroon.
yeah. I mean, well, I wouldn't go that far. Like I know
Okay.
Misha Burgo Gossman is a maroon, right?
Yes.
It's possible. It's possible, but
Hmm.
it's the possibility that,
Hmm.
like you said, puts things into perspective and makes you go,
Yes.
oh, it's not just history, it's actually impacting me. So that's something I want to look into a lot more, exactly who went where and what, and all the different things that happened. So
For sure.
how does this affect your music making? And I mean, it might be an obvious question, but I mean, we've talked about very deep things. How does it
Yeah.
come out how is it playing and affecting your music making recently? Your heritage, the struggle, everything that's been going on um, in the world. How's that affected your music making recently?
Absolutely. Most recently, as you know, some heinous crimes and police incidences of police brutality are reminding us that we're still not free,
Mm-hmm.
Danielle. And and every opportunity you have to tie your craft to social activism and positive progress and movement, I think you should take that as an artist because I think that there are a trillion love songs out there. And it's okay. I love songs and I love poetry and I love idealism. But also we have to open our eyes and realize what's going on and then use the tools that we have. You know what I mean? At our disposal. So whether it is you are a visual artist, and you channel what you're feeling about the things that are happening in the world into that art, all
Mm-hmm.
different sources of creativity. So I was feeling very frozen at the time and very numb. And I was bubbling with a friend of mine, Richard McNeil. He plays in my band, he plays keys.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Richard, I don't think I can write today. I'm sorry. And he says, what's going on? And I said, did you see, the footage, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yes, I saw it. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was watching. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And then he said, well, if you feel so strongly about it, just start writing. Just start
Mm-hmm.
writing. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, I don't know how to approach something like this because there's so many layers to uncover. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, if you were talking to that police officer, what would you say? And then I said, I would ask him, what do you have to say for yourself? And that is the first line of the song, Chant Their Names, that we released early in the summer. And I said, what
Mm-hmm.
I would ask the police officer, I'd be like, why are you doing this? What is your motivation? Do you have anything to say for yourself? Is this just, you know what I mean? And then it kind of evolved into like an appeal to him for him to have some
Mm-hmm.
conscience, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful. And I think one of
Thank
the things that, and maybe this is something that we gain from our heritage, is
you.
this mixing of the political and the musical in a way that's natural, and it's not necessarily, it's confrontational, but in a different way. I think of the Kaiso tradition in Trinidad,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
a lot. These are, some of these songs can be 8, 9, 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
they're always political. They have a political subtext, but it's not left wing, right wing. We hate each other. That it's not that.
Mhm.
I mean, it can be obviously, but it's more about like, oh, this is something that happened, and just a commentary on the politics of the day,
Mhm.
and really inventive and with humor. And the audience, even if they're
Yes.
listening to it, and the Calypsonian is saying something that is a little bit different, they don't necessarily agree with, they might say, "Oh wow, he really got him with that line. He really zinged
Yeah.
him." Like, so there's like, it's
Yes.
almost like sport, right? And that's
Mhm.
something that you did so well, responding to the moment, what was happening in the world and history with music, with art. And it was like, bam, it just came up. It was like, oh, this is now. This is,
Yes.
it's effective. It's true. It's real. It's coming from a
Yes.
person. It's authentic. It was such an impressive, and I encourage you to look up JahMila, Chant Their Names. It's on YouTube. I'm sure it's everywhere.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It's
super
on
easy.
YouTube and Spotify, all of the streaming platforms.
Yeah, and since then, has there been what has it been? What has writing music been like for you since that time? Since that point.
So since that time, I started a full-time job as a project manager at a tech company. So I have written maybe a total of 4 songs since then,
Mm-hmm.
and I have demos for them. I'm working with Erin Costello to record 3 of those songs, and I also have another song, Sugar and Spice,
Mm-hmm.
which is a love song.
Ah, well, that's
Yeah.
okay. That's great. It's great.
Yeah, but I felt like Chant Their Names said what I had to say politically, and then I just kind of like used whatever came. I just kind of poured it out on paper. But when Chant Their Names was created, what set it apart was that Richard, who I helped to create it with me,
Mm-hmm.
said, we're going to stop everything else we were doing during COVID. We're going to stop everything because the people need to hear this now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was absolutely floored when I realized that everyone who wanted to be involved, to share their energy and skills and talent, to put it out to the people. And they were not only Black people, there were people from all different backgrounds who were passionate about positive change as well.
Right.
So yeah, that video was not only me, it was the videographer that came and said, I want to make this video, and the publicist that said, I want to help you to promote this, and Richard, that's, you know what I mean. So people just kind of showed up, and then from that it went back to regular programming.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's that like, transitioning from woo to back to regular programming?
Oh, I don't mind it at all. I
Yeah.
feel like we did something good, and I felt like people were touched by it, and a lot of people may have, shaped, their
Wow.
feedback or what should I say, their attitude towards the issues that were going on, and that the song helped to influence them in a positive way. So I feel like that's good. Sometimes you have highs and lows, and that's okay.
I was going to say, wow, where did you get this incredibly positive, healthy attitude from? Can you teach this at universities, please, to young musicians? Because like, what you should be saying is like, oh, where's my next hit? Like, I'm like, will I ever succeed? Will I ever? But no, you're working full time. You have another. You're making music. You're making meaningful music. You're making impactful music, and you're working another job. This is some sort of incredible hybrid life that you have. And do you see this as a sort of model for how artists can live?
It is a lot of work, especially balance. If I could, I would do music all alone. I do have another side of my brain that, loves management, loves HR, loves that sort of stuff. But I love music more.
Right.
And
Right.
if I could do music alone, I would love to. But at this point, especially with COVID upon us, the prospects of being able to manage yourself and your life just on your creativity is a little more harder than it was even before.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing too, when I was growing up, I went to university. I pursued an economics degree. I went to NSCC. I did business management, and I've been trying to develop that. So I will always have something to fall back on, because the worst thing that could happen to me, Danielle, and you might understand, is I would never want to rely so much on music that sell myself short with it.
Right.
That I feel like I have to take on another layer of clothes. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking
Exactly.
about.
Exactly what you mean. It's
Learn to
like,
twerk.
yeah, exactly. You want to be making it, saying things that you want to be able to say. And I think
Absolutely.
we have this very romantic image, at least in orchestral music, that you suffer for art and you have just, a loaf of bread and just, maybe butter. But you give everything that you possibly can and you struggle and you barely survive. But no, when you look at the lives of many of the artists, many of them like many of them were so financially smart about the way they used their money that that's what allowed them to be inventive and allowed them to be creative. So Rachmaninoff, not no, I'll tell another story. There are two famous composers that met and they were
Hmm.
enemies, kind of, right?
Okay.
And actually, it was this one is Rachmaninoff and Stravinsky, and their wives finally got them together to talk.
Hmm.
And when they overheard the two men talking, in the parlor for a while, they weren't talking about music; they were talking about finances. And it's like, you lost the copyright on this. You would have made 500. Because if you have that support, if you have that base, and you can support yourself, then you're allowed to be creative because you're not beholden to making sure that you sell X number of whatever, right? And I think of Sufjan Stevens, who has his own record label, who's a person like that. He's incredibly inventive and creative because he can afford to be. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited, honestly, about what that will allow you to do. It's super big. I'm sure it must be absolutely crazy. But for you, with your background, to have that level of authenticity and freedom to do whatever the heck you want to do. Say we want to
Exactly.
that, yeah, okay. I see that big smile. So yeah, okay, that's it. We're hitting the nail on the head there. So
And I wanted
that's
to
great.
add to you as well, Danielle, what the Nova Scotia community has done to foster that and to nurture that too. Because, as I said, when I was in Jamaica, a lot of the things I was doing was always supporting roles, someone else's dream. And
Right,
I always just felt good to be included.
right.
But when I got here, I had some brothers in a band called Dub Cartel that shoved me into the middle of the stage. They took
Oh
every
yeah,
opportunity to,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, to like a deer in headlights, and I had to respond. And I've grown a lot as an artist since I've been here. And the Music Nova Scotia has been supporting me as well, always keeping me connected. Even with opportunities even like the one that I did with you guys, the Black is Beautiful series.
Right.
So I'm really thankful for that.
What was that like for you performing with Symphony Nova Scotia? Like, what were some of the, like? Was it scary? Was it fun? Was it exciting? Was it different? Was it what you expected? What did that feel like?
I was excited about it, and I'm going to, with your permission, Daniel, I'm going to
Okay.
share. I'm gonna share because when I was late that day and there was the prospect that I wouldn't get to perform, I bawled my eyes out because I was looking forward to it for weeks ahead.
Yeah.
And and it was a lesson as well because you know what? I don't think I've been late for anything since then.
That's right. So for the listeners, I remember there was a real reason why you had ended up being late,
Yep.
and but so this is actually because you said you learned a lesson, but so did we. So did we learn a lesson because what's always really interesting and something that I've learned as a result of being with Symphony Nova Scotia is we do so many partnerships with so many different groups, so many collaborations with people from different cultures and musicians from different music cultures as well too. Because every every music, capital M music, has a culture, and when you
Yeah.
take any culture and put it together with orchestral culture, there's often something that doesn't really, often something that there's often, I don't know what this is, but there's often
A little conflict.
yeah, there
Yeah.
we go. There's often a little conflict. Why? Why is that? So in orchestra land, and I'm calling it semi-pejoratively orchestra land on purpose. It's like if we are having a concert today, the musicians have to have the music 2 weeks in advance because we're expecting them to do everything perfectly, right?
Yes.
Dear listener, when
Absolutely.
you come to the hall, you're expecting basically perfection, right? They know that. Okay, give us 2 weeks, we can do anything. That's a lot of pressure in itself. If they're going to have that music on time, then the librarian has to have it in their hands to give to the bowers 2 weeks before that, which means the librarian has to have had it at least 2 weeks before that, which means it has to be on its way from wherever in Germany at least 2 weeks before that, which means it has to have been ordered to, so everything's bam, 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 bam. So we
Yep.
are very, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Orchestral culture, actually, it's not a bad thing. This is how we work. It's
No,
just
not
like
at all.
bam,
I
bam,
respect
bam,
it.
bam, 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 bam. So then, if somebody comes to work with us and they're not used to that culture, I've seen this happen so many times. People come to orchestra and they're just like they're already scared. They're already like, I hope I'm doing everything okay. Okay,
Yes.
was that okay? Was that good? Oh, I'm so scared. And that doesn't help music making. That doesn't help
Mm.
music making. So there have been, I'm so glad that we were just like, oh yeah, you're gonna be fine. We talked about it. It's just like she's so strong. The musicians loved you. They loved
Thank
you.
you.
They
Thank
loved,
you.
loved, loved. And I wouldn't say that if it wasn't true because I would get emails or whatever. But they did, and we were so we totally were like, no, she should absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, and you just knocked it out of the park in both performances. So it was so great because you're such a natural musician. It's so easy to work with you.
Thank you very
And so
much.
that was such a learning for me as well too, right? But this is one of the
Yes.
things. So don't and to all the musicians out there that are working with orchestras,
Mhm.
it's not just you. Orchestral culture is not necessarily flexible, right? And that's
Mhm.
because of we're tuning to A440 or A441. It's very, very precise. And
It is.
we're unionized, and all of these things are what allow us to do the things that allow us to perform at the level at which we perform, that degree of specificity, that degree of rigor.
Absolutely.
Um,
I'll share something
sorry, I'm
with
just
you
like blah blah
too.
blah blah blah.
No, I love it. No, sorry. I don't mind me. I just wanted to interject to add on to a point you were saying. Bob Marley. I hear that my father tells me that he was the strictest man in
Right,
rehearsals. They would be rehearsing for a tour months in advance. They
right.
didn't just get up and roll out of bed. And that's the sort of what should I say? I'm gonna call it laziness for
Mm-hmm.
want of a better, more euphemistic word. Because I am used to a culture, the culture that framed me, the culture that matured me was a little lax in that
Mm-hmm.
regard. You know what I mean? We weren't always on time, you know what I mean? And I think that is what separates a great musician and a great performance from something that's mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
So I aspire to that. As a matter of fact, I thought it was refreshing and I was like, yes, it gave me something to aspire towards. It was like, that's the sort of discipline that separates, good from great.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I respect that. So yeah, kudos to Orchestra Land and thank you for that.
Well, this is one of the this is now to really get into it, because we both come at it from the different from because you are a black leader working with white musicians in a non, so let's say like you're a black musician, a black woman working with maybe a lot of Western European musicians in a
Yeah.
black music, and I'm a black man working with a lot of Western Europeans in Western European music. So we see that.
Yes.
So we're very we're doing interesting things, aren't we? Wow,
We are.
we certainly are, and it's interesting. It's just so it's so interesting. I think of in terms of the cultural shifts once in terms of the way people make music, right? Is it organic or is it more technical, organic or technical? I was working with some indigenous musicians,
Yes.
and I had they were allotted by moi 24 minutes of rehearsal, and during which time we would begin with their 6-minute piece. We would play it through. We would have 2 minutes for comments. We would rehearse a few spots. And then at minute 17, we would play it through again, leaving 1 minute for comments, a couple of things, right? We got to the end and they were like, you know what? Let's change this. And I'm just like, that's not on the plan, because I'm very methodical, right? So these cultures, when we come together making music, it was really interesting to see what we learned. And I mean, you were obviously very, very rigorous, because the way that in your performances, you were just it wasn't methodical, but it was just nailing everything each time, right? So it was just, you're so reliable and consistent. That's one thing that made it so easy and wonderful to work with you. And
Thank
I
you.
think that orchestras have a long way to go in terms of working with musics of other cultures and learning those styles, but we want to, and we're willing. So what's it like being what is it like for you being like, do you have to teach aspects of reggae to non-Jamaican, non-black participants? Do you feel like you have to teach and help them understand the culture, or do they already come to it with understand? I'm saying they, like that's already othering, but like, because maybe they didn't grow up listening to Bob Marley, but maybe they did, and they're white.
Maybe they did.
Can
And
you
you
just
know
talk
what?
about that?
All
You know
of
what I'm
those.
getting at? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
And all of what you're saying is correct.
I don't
Because
hear that often, so thank you.
everything, yeah, even the contrasting views are correct. Because I have 8 people in my musical family, and they are all there because they wanted to be.
Right.
I did not have to ask them to be there. They showed up for me and they keep showing up for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, big up all of you guys. I love you a lot. A bunch of them grew up listening to reggae music heavily. Alec Frith, for example, has been running Sound System Sundays as one of the biggest what should I say, supporters of reggae music in the city for years before I even moved here. And Andrew Branch, who plays percussions in our band as well, he had his own band and still does. Andrew Branch and the Halfway Tree. So he plays with them, and then he also plays with me as well. So that's great. But then, like my friend Christine, Christine has a little bit of a what should I say? Performing, like theatrical training. She did some acting when she was in high school, and she works at the Immigration Museum. She didn't know much about the musical culture of Jamaica outside of the popular Bob Marley, for example. But then getting her to go to Jamaica with me, and which I want to talk a little bit more about later on, and really exposing her to the music, writing down the lyrics and also the translations of it so she can actually understand
That's great. That's
what
great.
it's saying. Exactly. So there are different, with each member of my band, we have to approach it differently. And then collectively, we bounce ideas off of each other. As to how are we going to approach this style, and then we like reference an artist that we know or whatever, you know what I mean? And we learn together.
That's fantastic. That's so great.
Yes.
I remember in terms of the Western European interface with reggae, working in the summers at kids camps in Germany, and reggae is huge in Germany. It's huge. I hadn't realized the extent. right? I was like,
Yes.
okay, well, thank God I'm black and half Jamaican, or else I'd be totally lost because they're like, oh ja, und dann das Album hier und hat so gemacht, und das war in 1900. They knew reggae and
Yep.
like deep
Yep.
cuts, and like on this tour, this happened, and this guy. It was really impressive. Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's great.
I have a little story to tell you about
Tell
that
us a
too.
story.
I remember when I came here and I was talking to Alec, and he was like, "So does your dad still have that Stratocaster that he played the and I'm like, dude,
It's like,
that's how he knows the music.
right.
That is how well he knows the
So
music.
great.
So that when he went and sat and got the opportunity to sit with my dad and play, the level of conversation they were able to have is something that I probably wouldn't have been able to have because I haven't been digging so deep into the history like Alec has been, you know, and he's been doing it for much longer than I have because he's a little older than I am as well. So that was something that was really eye-opening for me. And
Right.
it brings me also to appropriation versus respect. So a lot of people think that if you are white, you should not be playing reggae, or vice versa. If you are black, maybe you shouldn't be playing classical music, just for example's sake. And I'm like, I know people from different backgrounds that
Mm-hmm.
take a more respectable approach to an art or a culture, no gimmicks, you know what I mean? No disrespect. They are they are sincerely fascinated and moved by it. And I feel like if that is your approach, it should not be labeled as appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But if you are, you know, dressing up and just being gimmicky about it and not giving it the respect it deserves, not finding out about the root, then I feel like then you might want to ask some more questions. But both the bands that I played with here, Dub Cartel and the guys that are now in my current band, both traveled with me to Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Because I brought it up. I was like, do you really love this genre? Do you really love it? You know, it's the voice of the oppressed. It's the voice of reggae. Really stands for a group of, you know, the lower class of Jamaicans in a time when they didn't have any other outlet, and this was their outlet. And I remember having the Dub Cartel guys in Kingston around all the Rastafarians, Naya Bingi playing, and my dad is just blowing all the marijuana smoke in their faces. And at that moment, when I saw how much they were soaking it all in, I would never ever, I would defend them
Mm-hmm.
because it is not appropriation. And people accuse people that try out new things of appropriation, and I think it's not so always on the surface. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for letting
Well
me.
said. Absolutely. Let's just so everybody just rewind that last 2 minutes and listen to it again. No, because it's a real thing. It's a really really important point, and I'm glad that you talked about that, because people will wonder. People ask, like, where's the line drawn? But I think having that distinction between appropriation and respect is hugely important. And you're a leader, even just for saying that and for making that demarcation. I think it makes it really, it's very helpful for us to have in our minds, especially now, because snap judgments abound, and sometimes
Yes.
appropriation is real and appropriation is violence, but sometimes it can also be, we can be intellectually lazy without looking at the work that real people have done, saying, oh, he's white, he's playing reggae, appropriation, but you don't know that actually maybe he, there are white people in Jamaica. Maybe he spent 20 years studying the craft,
Exactly.
So it's always about looking a little bit deeper. Nobody said to me, you're black, you can't do classical.
Mhm.
I've never heard that. I don't think I will. Maybe I will at some point. It's
No, let's hope you don't. Fingers crossed.
I'm not just not. I'll be like, okay. Well, it's my job. I'm way too far, and I can't do anything else. So sorry. Like, and I should seriously address that question. But yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy, because in Trinidad,
Mhm.
where my mom grew up, they heard classical music every day in the schools. Right.
Wow.
That's what they heard. They heard classical music every day.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. They grew up because they grew up with as a British school system, right? So
Ah, of course.
they grew up hearing this classical music, and they grew up with it, and it'd be like,
Mhm.
some soca, a little reggae, some
Yeah.
calypso, some classical, then some Bach, then a kaiso, and then so
Mm.
that's just kind of how it was, right? And that's why everything kind of blends together. So
Yep.
you would say that reggae is for everyone. Would you agree with that? Reggae is for everyone.
Reggae is for those who respect it and understand it, and not only want to dance to it, but want to understand. You take a second to listen a little deeper and to understand really what it represents. Because I know people who say reggae changed their lives.
Can you tell us more
I know
about that?
people. Oh, of course. I've toured a little bit. I toured with this band called Groundation from California for years, and they're a predominantly white band playing incredibly great reggae music mixed
Hmm.
with jazz as well. And as I said, I toured with Family Man and the Wailers, and you go to places and you get to have conversations with people in strange places that are like,
Hmm.
I this is the first album I got and it changed my life, and I've loved reggae since, or things like I used to, be a little bit more self-deprecating or whatever, and this
Hmm.
music lifts me up. It gives me positive vibrations. You know what I mean? Things like that.
It's
And
amazing.
it's always good to hear these things because you can only say that if you say, okay, then if you make reggae, you should listen to it. But if everyone in the world is listening to it and you're trying to sell the music to all the ears of the world, then people are going to be moved by it. And who are you to tell them not to sing along
Right.
or play along? You know, it's as simple as that,
Yeah.
really. Or the next time you put out an album, say, for black ears only, or for white ears only, or just kind of put a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. But you are a fierce Black woman leader who who's bringing or who are opening who's bringing reggae to everybody, who's bringing reggae to stages across the world, to Africa, to the concert hall, to the orchestral stage. That's what you're doing. So in terms
Thank
of
you.
being, talking about, I think you're a real shining light. I don't know if you see yourself as that, but really you are in terms of leadership. Do you see, like, how do you see your role in terms of, you talked about what reggae can do and who it's for. So, in the
Mhm.
same way, can you talk about JahMila and what you want to do in the world with your art, with your presence, with your voice?
For sure. That's a great question. I'm going to start off with a very cliche one. If I've seen far, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. Um, the giants are the Dennis Browns of the world, the Bob Marley of the world, my dad and all the work that he put in, and to understand what was the driving force for those guys, it was because they wanted their voice to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Little guys from the garrison and ghetto communities that have used this art craft to spread so much joy and positivity and to actually bring about good, positive social change. And if I am not in it for that reason, then you know what I mean? I don't feel like I'm approaching it with the right way. I
Yeah.
want to be able to continue that journey because those guys aren't around to do it anymore. And I want to know that reggae is in good hands, you know?
I think reggae is in tremendous hands with you, JahMila. That's
Thank you.
that's it has been an honor and a privilege to speak with you tonight. One of Canada's up and coming artists in so many different ways, in terms of leadership, in terms of social justice, in terms of spreading that joy and positivity through music, in terms of the way that you use the freedom that you have to say what you want to say things that lift us all up and that respond in the moment to the moment. It's tremendous. We're so looking forward to working on behalf of Symphony Nova Scotia. We are so looking forward to the next time that we get to work with you, that we get to work with you, and that we both get to push boundaries in terms of what happens on the stage and what happens in the audience and everything in between. So thanks so much, JahMila, for being. I'm going to leave it to you. Let me ask you one final question. I would just like you to say a few words to the people, to Symphony Nova Scotia listeners, to anybody here. Just say a few words about maybe what the next couple of months, maybe the next 6 months holds for you as an artist and what you hope to see in the world in that time.
Oh, for sure. So, within the next couple of months, our team had held off on releasing some material that we recorded in Jamaica in February when we went pre-COVID, our band traveled to Jamaica. So we'll be releasing a video for our next single, Roots Girl.
Mm,
And then we're also working on our album. So we'll be having two more releases from that between now and February. So look out for that. Um, and pretty much, I want everyone to be safe. I want everyone to care for themselves because it is a hard time. It is a hard time for all of us.
mhm.
You know, reach out to your friends, check in on them, make sure everyone's okay because a lot of us are fighting really like silent, quiet battles. So, yes, look out for your friends, be safe, love your brother as yourself, and keep making music, whatever, just keep making music.
Thanks so much, Jamila. Jamila, thank you
Thank,
so much. It's been great having you. This
thank you,
has
Danielle.
been enough room, and there's enough room for Jamila on all of our stages, and we hope that there'll be enough room for her in your music listening, whether it's on Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. Take a listen out for her. Have a great evening,
Thank you.
everyone.
During these challenging times, we believe it's essential to continue working with community organizations that help bring people together, even when we're apart. And that's why we're supporting 60 music and cultural festivals in a safe way across Canada this summer through the TD Ready commitment.